Hi guys, welcome to Killing Time with Rogue, and with me today I have Hannah.
Today we're going to be talking about the Sodder family.
On December 24th, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, that was no more than 5.5 square miles. The most horrific thing that the town has ever seen was happening. Around 1 a.m., a massive fire broke out. George, Jeannie, and 4 of their 9 children escaped. George ran back into the house to find his other 5 children. His other 4 children were in the upstairs bedroom of the house, and he assumed the 5 children that were missing would still be up there. He went to run upstairs, but the staircase was engulfed in flames. He thought about climbing the ladder to the second floor that he kept outside for such emergencies, and to his surprise, the ladder was strangely missing. Which is super fucking weird. Why do you have a ladder hanging outside of your window?
You're asking to be robbed. You're asking
That's
to be
what
robbed.
I mean. Like, what do you mean?
You're just asking for it at that point.
With his mind racing, it was difficult to create a complete thought. But he thought that if he could pull one of his coal trucks over to the window, he could climb on it and save his children. Strangely, neither of the trucks started. He knew his children were trapped somewhere, and the panic was taking a toll on him. During this ordeal, he did not realize his arm was drenched in blood from running through the burning house, and his voice was hoarse with screaming their names, trying to get an answer or hear anything.
All while this is happening, George Sodder's daughter, I forgot her name again.
Marion.
Marion. Okay, sorry. All of a sudden, nope, wrong. I don't know where. Okay. All while this is happening, George Sodder's daughter, forgot it again.
Marion.
Marion? You mean the freaking death of me? Okay. All while this is happening, George Sodder's daughter, Marion, ran over to the neighbor's house to call the fire department and didn't get a response. Another neighbor saw their house in blazes and called the fire department, but yet again, no answer. Why is nobody answering?
That's what I was gonna say. It's like, what are you
doing? That
doing?
is your job.
Literally.
That's your job. You have one job.
And they can't even do that. Yeah.
No. One of his neighbors was so fed up that they drove to the next town to try and get a hold of a fire chief, and the fire chief used a tree phone to try and get a whole unit together to put out a fire. Unfortunately, this took far too long, and by the time the fire department arrived, the Sodder's residence was already it was already 7 hours later. They came around 8 a.m.
Yeah, and a tree phone, for you and those who don't know, it's basically like a, what are they called? A phone booth? Where you have to put the money in. It's basically like that, you know.
I thought it was a tray on a phone.
No. It's literally a phone, like, attached to a pole for emergencies.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, on this day on Christmas Day of 1945, the investigators sifted through the ashes for remains, and nothing turned up. The fire chief suggested that the fire that caused this horrific accident would have been hot enough to cremate the bodies. George covered the basement with 5 layers of dirt and determined this would be their memorial site. 5 death certificates were issued just before the new year, and the cause of death was, quote-unquote, fire or suffocation.
Strange events led up to the fire that some may consider to be paranormal. A few months before the fire occurred, a stranger came to the Sodder's house to ask about hauling some lumber, and he wandered to the back of the house. While he was back there, he pointed to 2 separate fuse boxes and stated, quote, "These are going to cause you a fire someday," end quote. George thought this was a strange statement to hear from a complete stranger because he just had the fuse box checked from his local power company. And in the same month, another man had tried to sell the Sodder family and became irate when the family declined his advances. As the man was leaving, he warned George that this house is going to go up in smoke and that, quote, "Your children are going to be destroyed and you're going to repay for the dirty remarks you made about Mussolini," end quote. Which is strange because, like, that's, Mussolini wasn't in America around that time. So,
Exactly, so whoever was threatening him would have had to know that he was, one, an immigrant, and 2, where he came from.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, very
strange.
To give some background information to the Sodder family, George was born in Tulla, Sardinia, which is Italy, in 1895, and immigrated to the United States when he turned 13 years old in 1908. He came with one of his brothers through Ellis Island. Once in the United States, his brother returned to Italy, leaving George alone. During that time, there were only a few ways to find work in the United States: agriculture, railroad work, or laborers. At only 13 years old, George started his life in America as a railroad worker by carrying water and various supplies to the laborers of Pennsylvania Railroad. Jesus. After a few years of working as a railroad assistant, George moved to West Virginia to create his own trucking company that would haul rubbish away from construction sites. After working one day, he stopped in a store called, quote-unquote, the Music Box, and met his wife, the owner's daughter, Jeannie. Between 1923 and 1945, they had 10 children, which nowadays seems like a lot, but back then it was not uncommon to have a large family, especially if you had a farm. There were not any fancy pieces of equipment that could do everything for you. The more children they had, the faster the work was done for the day.
It was known that George had a very strong opinion about politics, and he never revealed why he left Italy. When knowing this information, it's easy to assume that his family what's that word again?
Perished.
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 Okay, I'm gonna go back to with knowing, so we can just easily segue that. With knowing this information, it's easy to assume that his family perished due to the remarks that he made about the dictator. The oldest Sodder son recalled a vehicle parked outside their house approximately 2 weeks before the fire broke out that would intently watch the children when they came home from school. English,
motherfucker, do you speak it?
Okay, I'm gonna go over to the older. Okay.
No, it's okay. Just keep going.
Just keep going?
Just keep going.
Okay. Around midnight on Christmas morning, after the children opened a few gifts and the house was filled with sounds of the house. Oh, well, that's okay. Around midnight. That did not segue right. That was like a compound sentence or whatever. I don't know. Around midnight on Christmas morning, after the children opened a few gifts. Okay. Around midnight on Christmas morning, after the children opened a few gifts, the house was filled. Oh, then filled. Okay. Then the house was filled with sounds of a ringing phone. Jeannie, George's wife, rushed to answer it, and she was greeted with the sound of laughter and a clinking of glasses. The unfamiliar woman... Oh, geez, I can't. Okay, this is worse than the first time. The unfamiliar woman on the phone asked to speak to someone who never lived there. Thinking it was an accident, Jimply... My brain was like... Oh. Thinking it was an accident, Jeannie simply said, quote, "You have the wrong number," end quote, and hung up the phone. On the way to her room, she noticed that her eldest son was asleep on the couch. Seeing him, she assumed the other children went upstairs and that they were fast asleep in their bedroom. The strange thing about this night in particular, that all the lights were on, the door was still unlocked, and the windows were open. She had no recollection of unlocking the door or opening the windows. Confused, she walked around the house ever so carefully not to wake her sleeping children, closing the downstairs of the house.
See, this is really strange to me because, one, it's in the middle of December. Why are all your windows open? And why is your door unlocked? Like it's the middle of the night. You know, I would not be going to sleep. That's for damn sure. Like, I could not.
Well, she also didn't she didn't open them. She just wasn't like, you know what, kitties, we're gonna freeze today.
Exactly. So like,
Let's
how would you
open
be
up
comfortable?
those.
Yeah. How would you be comfortable being like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. They're fine. That's fine. No.
Yeah, I would have been like, no, George, honey, come here. Where was George during this?
Honestly, it didn't say. Like, I have no idea. She just said that she saw her oldest kid.
Suspicious.
Right? So maybe George stole his kids.
Maybe.
Had amnesia and didn't realize that he took them. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. Good theory. Oh, wait. Okay. 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 While Mrs. Sodder later told the police... No, I said... Oh.
Why?
Well... Oh, no. Well, Mrs. Sodder later told the police that... Oh, wow. I don't know what's wrong.
Oh my god.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Sodder later told the police that on that Christmas night, right before she dozed off, she heard a loud bang and then a rolling sound. Then an hour later, her house was on fire.
Was on fire.
Was on fire.
Personally, that sounds like a napalm attack. In Vietnam, they had pineapple bombs, which is like this hard rubber shell and like metal things that poked out the top to look like a pineapple. It sounds like whatever that bang was could have been related to the pineapple bomb they used in Vietnam. But Vietnam didn't happen until 1955. This fire occurred in 1945.
Time travel, maybe?
I mean, maybe. Or maybe, like, whoever did this had more advanced information. You know, because there wasn't any information of... At least I couldn't find it. Maybe they thought, like... Maybe FBI was like, oh, she's gonna kill someone. Oh. I couldn't find any information of when pineapple bombs were created. I just remember learning about it in school. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Smarts over there.
Yeah. But going back to the start of our information, there was no evidence of bones, either human or animal remnants in the fire. It takes approximately 2 hours at 2,000 degrees to convert a body from flesh and bone into ash. Their house was destroyed in only 45 minutes. If the incident was caused by a napalm, it still is not possible that their children perished in the fire and had no remains. Their bones would have been singed, but still present because it only lasted 45 minutes. Napalm burns anywhere from 1,400 to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, but the duration proves that the children were not consumed by the fire.
Yeah, I'm no fire expert, but I'm gonna say the fires were the same as they are now, and currently we've never had a body like completely incinerated that I've ever saw on the news.
Yeah, and even...
I don't know if old-timey fires were different. They were built different. But
even with cremation, there's still like little particles that they have to like smash and stuff with the mallet to grind them into ash. Like there still would have been something, you know?
Yeah. Well, the initial police report stated that the fire was caused by faulty wiring. However, this cannot be true because the lines were cleanly cut, but not burnt or fried. Also, Jeannie, Mrs. Sodder, stated that the night before the fire, the lights... Whoa. Oh. Okay. English, apparently. Also, Jeannie, Mrs. Sodder, stated that the night before the fire, the lights were on in the living room, and she had to shut them all off before turning in for the night. Backing up what you said about the pineapple napalms, the next morning, while shifting through the ashes, they found hard rubber objects in their yard.
And it would make sense if it was napalm, because this is how the chemicals were housed, like in this weird rubber thingy. Later, there was a woman who claimed to have served the 5 children that were missing breakfast at a rest stop roughly 50 miles west from where the Sodder family lived. Another woman at a Charleston hotel said she had seen photos of the children in the newspaper and claims to have seen 4 out of the 5 of the children a week after the fire registering into her hotel with 2 women and 2 men. She recalls the men being hostile whenever she tried to engage with the children. The one man turned around and began rapidly talking to the whole party in Italian. Then the whole party stopped talking to her. They left early the next morning.
So, it could be the guy that said, you're gonna regret what you said about Miss Laney.
See, that's what I was thinking too. Like, maybe he took his kids out of retaliation for what he said about the dictator.
Or he could be working with the dictator. I mean, I don't think that someone that high in power would, maybe if he was, like they said, he was very vocal about his political views. So maybe the dictator hired a hitman, but at the time it wasn't considered a hitman.
Or it could be something like what we seen with this past election with Trump people, like how they were literally threatening other people for not voting for their party. Maybe he didn't have to hire anyone. Maybe it was just a radicalist person,
Yeah, maybe it was like a hardcore, supporter of him, and he was like, I'm gonna follow you all the way to America and, try and kill you and your family. But it backfired, or maybe that was his plan to kidnap the children. But you don't know.
But see, if that was the case, why did he wait so long? Like, this fire occurred in 1945. George moved to America in 1908, whenever he was 13.
Maybe it took him that long to find him. I mean, back then they really didn't have, Facebook to be like, George Sodder, 13, profiles pop up like, Georgie boy, I will get you today. Let me scroll through your feed. Oh, this guy right here. Yep. He had spaghetti for dinner last night. It's him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Off to America.
Because he also moved too. Like, he moved hours away, so you're probably right. It probably did take him a hot minute to find him.
Yeah, well, George and Jeannie were so desperate to find out what happened to their 5 children that they reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Ultimately, their case was denied because the case was local, and if the FBI was confronted to assist in a case, they would be more willing to help. But the Fayetteville Police and Fire Department declined their offer, and they can't come in without local authorities being like, you can come in.
Yeah, because
walk them.
They'd be basically stepping on their toes, and the hierarchy of power has to be upheld.
Yeah, I mean, if Aaron Hotchner was, in charge of the FBI back then, I would have said, come on through, baby. Come on through.
The next stop for the Sodders was to hire a private investigator by the name of C.C. Tinsley, who discovered that the person who originally threatened George was a member of the coroner's jury that deemed the fire accidental.
Hold on. C.C. Tinsley reporting for duty. I'm sorry. I feel like they hired him because of the name.
Yeah.
I'm personally, if I saw C.C. Tinsley, I would, that right there, man for the job. Well, do you think that he just claimed it accident because he was trying to cover tracks, maybe?
Personally, I do. After Tinsley heard about the guy who threatened George initially, he also heard a rumor that a man by the name of F.J. Morris, who was the fire chief of Fayetteville, found a heart at the scene and promptly buried it in a dynamite box underneath the rubble and ash. If you remember earlier, George covered it with 5 layers of dirt and cement. So, did he dig up the cement and then plant it? You know what I mean? Although he found this heart, he told reporters that there was no evidence of body parts at the scene. The investigator, Tinsley, persuaded Morris to show them where he found and buried the heart. Together, Tinsley and Morris dug up the box and took the organ to the coroner, who concluded that it was a beef liver and not an actual heart. This liver was also unscorched, looking as though it was fresh, and not rotten in any way, meaning that Morse planted it in hopes of the Sodder family stopping the investigation, which makes this tragedy much more mysterious.
That's a lot of work.
That's what I mean. Like, why would you go through all that shit for some, like, that's just, you dug up concrete and planted a liver.
Yeah, that's a lot of work to, like, brush it off as a, fire killing the children. I mean, over the next few years after the fire, okay, let's try that again. Well, over the next few years after the fire, many tips continued to come to the family. George saw a photo of the children in New York City and was convinced one of the students was his daughter. In 1949, 4 years after the fire occurred, the Sodders decided to investigate the fire scene by hiring a pathologist.
Yeah.
Hiring a pathologist from Washington, D.C. by the name of Oscar B. Hunter. Through this investigation, there was several small objects found, including parts of a bone.
An excerpt from this investigation stated, quote, "The human bones consist of 4 lumbar vertebrae belonging to one individual. Since the transverse recesses are fused, the age of this individual at death should have been 16 or 17 years. The top limit of age should have been 22, since the centra, which normally fuse at 23, are still unfused. On this basis, the bones show greater skeletal maturity than one would expect for a 14-year-old boy, the oldest missing Sodder child. It is, however, possible, although not probable, for a boy 14 and a half years old to show 16 through 17 maturation." End quote. What is most strange about this is that in the report, there was no evidence that these vertebrae were exposed to fire, and there was no evidence of any other remains.
Well, later on in the report, it states that the bones were found where most likely in the concrete that George poured when making the basement a memorial for his children. The investigators told the Sodders that the investigation was hopeless and declared the case cold. Not taking the advice of the investigator, the Sodders offered a $5,000 reward for the retrieval of their children, then increased it to $10,000, which at that time was probably a lot more than the $10,000 we see now. After this reward was increased, the Sodders were receiving tips from everywhere, and each led George investigating by himself, and each time returned home empty-handedly, sadly.
So for the $10,000 in 1945 or 49, it would equate to $144,000 today. Like, imagine someone offering you so much money. I'm surprised they didn't have more tips on what
I'm surprised. If I was reading the newspaper one day, just sipping on, my morning coffee in between, doing the scrub-a-dubbing of the house, I would have dressed up and be like, "Hello, I am,
I am your child.
Are you my birth giver?"
Anything to get me out of debt.
Yeah, like, hello. For $10,000, I'll be your child.
Literally.
Because I mean, at like, if we're talking about through, like, my age now, and compared to the timeline, I would have been like a good, probably about the age that we would have, because we're the same age, would have been their age of their daughter.
That is true. During that time, we would have been the same. Yeah.
I would have gladly been like, "I'm your daughter." Gladly, hands down.
Yeah. Well, more than 20 years after the fire occurred, Jeannie received a letter from Kentucky with no return address. Once again, the Sodders hired a private investigator to go to Kentucky and investigate. They never heard from him again. They fear that if they publish where the letter came from, or the name of the town it came from, that their children would be put in harm's way. George became desperate. In an interview, he was recorded saying, quote, "Time is running out for us. We only want to know if they died in the fire, like we want to be convinced. And if not, we want to know what happened to them." End quote.
This is like a lot. I mean, this is their like 5 missing children, and I would want answers too. But I don't know. Like, this is a lot to pay someone to go all the way to a different state on a whim, on a letter.
Yeah, and
does it even state what the letter says? Like, this is like, I'm your child, I'm in Kentucky, or like, help me.
Yeah, through my research, I couldn't find what exactly was in the letter. It was just that there was no return address, and she sent a private investigator. There wasn't any discussion of what the letter was. I mean, if you can find it, I'd be more than happy to look at it, but I searched for almost a week, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. Like, what did the letter say?
I have no idea. Like, what would convince her that, oh, my kids are down there? Like, it could have just been a random, like, they mailed it to the address because that was the only address they knew,
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, in 1968, a year later, George passed away. Jenny put up a fence around their property and began adding rooms onto their house, furthering separating herself from the outside world. Something that is just heartbreaking is that Jenny wore black after the fire and until her death in 1968. The youngest and the last surviving Sodder children, Sylvia, does not believe that her siblings died in the fire. I forgot that they had kids that survived.
Yeah, they had, out of the 10 kids, 4 of them lived. 1 was away. Like, 1 had their own house, so 4 of the 9 children that still lived in the house survived. And the youngest one was Sylvia, who was only 2 years old when the fire happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Something that's, her very first memory of the fire, though, that occurred when she was 2, that's like, oh, you just said that.
Yeah. Okay.
We're going to take that out. Well, she'll never forget the sight of her father's bleeding or the sympathy. No, what is that? The
Symphony.
Symphony. We're going to say that. So, Sylvia, she's 2, so we're going to go where? There. She will never forget the sight of her father bleeding or the symphony of her family's screams of her fucking Lord. Okay. I don't know why this statement's like really hard. So, she'll never forget the sight of her father bleeding or the symphony of her family's screams, and she still does not know why the fire occurred.
That concludes all of our information that we found on the Sodder family. Now for some theories of what happened to the missing Sodder children. I personally believe that someone in the Italian mafia knew of the fire that was going to occur by being set up or whatever, and stormed the house to gather the children that they could. Or that the mafia stormed the house and stole the children that they could gather and use it as leverage. What do you think happened?
Well, I love your theory. I like that theory, but like, wouldn't it be hard for like one man to like gather 5 children and go undetected?
But in the mafia, they travel in pairs, either 4 or 5 people. They take one vehicle, but it's a bunch of people.
That's fair. Also, I mean, with a house up in flames and then one of the kids gone trying to like find, get the fire department to come, and then the mother's just like, hyper focused on the fire. I guess that, I wouldn't see 2 men carrying but what would they put them in? Like a car?
No, that is a really good point. Like, maybe they were there, and maybe Jenny was staring at the fire and didn't notice that people came up and just took them.
Yeah. Maybe he had like a gun and was like, if you, run, I'll shoot you. Like, I'm just like wondering how they got 5 kids, and like, did they get a car? I don't know.
I'm not gonna lie, I did not research that, so I have no idea.
Yeah, another theory is that, here we are, very intense theory.
Mm-hmm.
What if the 5 kids were tired of being farm hands? I mean, that is all they've known their whole life, and, what if someone was like, hey, let's let's, dip out. Let's, do something more with our lives. Maybe, they read some, you know, opportunities in New York and was like, let's go, because they said that they swore they saw the one daughter in New York. Maybe the kids caused the fire
Well,
and
I mean, that
ran
would
away.
make sense. Yeah, because Jenny said that she had to close down the house for the night, turning off all the lights. And then after the
Mhm.
fire, the electrical lines were cut. They weren't burned, they were cut.
Yeah.
So,
So the electrical, I don't know, like structures of house in 1944, but was the electrical was inside the house. So assuming the electrical was inside the house, this person would have had to gone into the house, and I'm sure at that time, house creaks, there are 10 of them. Someone had to have heard someone coming into the house, right?
right.
They could have came in when all the windows were open as like a distraction and cut the wire, but maybe the kids did, or like maybe the one did and it like backfired, and but like that doesn't explain for the other 4 that are missing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And using that theory, like, the open windows would make sense because fire needs oxygen. So the more air in the downstairs area, the faster it would have burned.
Yeah. And
Instead of 45 minutes, it could have burned in like 15 if they would have had the windows open.
listen, in 45 minutes, those kids could have got, really far into like their travels.
True.
If like whether they were taken or they decided to leave, or who knows. So I think my like another theory is that maybe they did it.
You mean like George and
Maybe.
Jenny?
I was thinking more of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were tired of the lifestyle, but another theory could be, George and Jenny, were tired of having the responsibility of not maintaining, but, clothing and feeding 10 children. And they might have picked their favorites and, or maybe not. I mean, like by luck, the few that survived. So maybe like they were going bankrupt, no one knew, and then they had to play the the sad parent story.
Mm-hmm.
But like, part of me doesn't think so, because they went great lengths to find out.
Yeah, like they
And
were
if
paying
they,
people $10,000 or more just to see, like, where the kids
yeah,
were. Yeah.
but they got all those tips, and they all concluded like, hey, these tips aren't gonna be work out for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was extensive, like
I
lengths.
I was gonna say I kind of agree with that theory because during that time people would literally sell their children, like you're selling a puppy,
Yeah.
And maybe they did start the fire to kill the younger children and played the pity card to make it seem like they actually cared when they didn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe they, the kids knew that their parents were trying to kill them, and then, they ran away, and then they stayed hidden. Maybe they wanted to find the kids to like hush them up, or like, oh no, you're just confused. We didn't try to set you on fire.
Maybe.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess that's one theory to go off of.
Yeah. Alright, well, included in our description of our video, all of our theories are listed, and the references we use to find our information. If you have any theories of what may have happened to the missing Sodder children, have suggestions for any future videos, or even found more information on this case, please feel free to comment below. Make sure to subscribe to our Twitch page, Killing Time with Rogue, no spaces, all lowercase, where we are doing these podcasts live once a month on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/killingtimewithrogue, all lowercase, no spaces, where you can get early access to our weekly episodes, bonus episodes that have not been released, and exclusive merch. Next time we are going to be talking about the Smiley Face murder, where this murder was actually part of an American Horror Story episode. It was in season 8. It was Cult. I don't know what season it is. But whenever Tate would kill people, he would always draw a smiley face on the wall. This murder actually was a basis for the series. So, thanks for tuning in with us, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye!
Bye.